Hello, sixth grade. Miss Summers here, and I'm going to read chapter 17 of Bud Not Buddy in our book, written by Christopher Paul Curtis. You should follow along on your own as I read the story out loud, and then we'll discuss what we've read. Okay, chapter 17. I held the mop so that it was floating on top of the water in the bucket. I was pretending it was that underwater boat in the book Mama read to me, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Captain Nemo, I whispered, pretending I was a sailor. Hey, matey. The squabs were only able to plug 10,000 of the leaks we have. That means we have 10,000 left. And dadgummit, I think we're going down with all hands on board. I looked up to make sure no one was watching me too close. The dusky devastators of the Depression were still putting their instruments on the stage, waiting for Miss Thomas and Mr. Jimmy and Herman E. Calloway. I whispered, Heavenly Father, all is lost. Then I made the mop sink in the water, drowning Captain Nemo, Matey, and all the poor squabs. They went down with a bunch of bubbles and soap suds and dirt. I know Herman E. Calloway was trying to work me like a dog, but he was doing a real bad job at it. I'd already wiped all the tables and chairs down in the log cabin, and now I was going back to mop the floor for the second time. It was a piece of cake. The bucket even had a thing on top of it that you could use to wring the mop out. And Herman E. Calloway didn't even know how much fun I was having. Making somebody work hard isn't as easy as it looks. Some folks are good at it, some folks aren't. Some folks can look at you and tell if you're even talking about slacking off. They'll add some work to you faster than you can say Jack Robinson. Some folks will find an excuse to strap you even if you're working as hard as you ever did in your life. I stuck the mop head into the wringer. I pretended it was somebody at a washing machine, not paying attention to what he was doing and getting his whole body pulled through and wrung out. I let the handle up to see what was left of this poor soul. But before I could check, someone yelled, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. I looked up. The thug was brushing his sticks across the round gold metal thing next to his drums and making it sound like a soft rain was commencing to fall on someone's tin roof. Only instead of sounding like rain splashing any time it wanted to, the thug had it sounding like it was coming down in a steady, bouncy way. The dirty deed started making the piano sound like it was a kind of drum. For a second it fell right with the rain pats that the thug was making. Then it took off and made you think of what Niagara Falls must sound like. It sounded like big bright drops of water splashing up and over and up. The drops would fall loud and clear as anything. Then before you knew it, they were right back into the thug's steady bouncy beat. Steady Eddie started snapping his fingers real soft in time with the piano and the drum, his toothpick jumping right along with his fingers. He put his axe in his mouth and blew. But instead of the horn making music, it seemed like Steady made it talk. He blew one long, low, rumbly sound, and I knew right then, with that one deep, sad moan, what the most beautiful sound in the world was. Steady held the note for a long time, then made the sax drift away from the rest of the storm of music. I swirled and floated back and joined the rain sound that the thug and Dirty Deed kept going. I just stood there. I didn't even hear Miss Thomas and Mr. Jimmy and Herman Calloway come up from behind me. Miss Thomas rubbed her hands across my head and said, Bud, you've done a great job. The place is sparkling. I was going to say thank you, ma'am, but it seemed like talking was wrong with all these wonderful sounds were coming from the people on the stage. Mr. Jimmy said, LeBone, looking good, son. Herman E. Calloway grunted, and the three of them walked up to the stage. Mr. Jimmy picked up his horn and joined the storm. Miss Thomas sat on the stool, closed her eyes, tucked her head up and down, up and down. Herman E. Calloway stood next to his giant fiddle and started bobbing his head too. He put one of his hands near the top of the fiddle and began pulling all the strings with his other hand. Every time he patted the strings, it seemed like something wide and heavy was walking by, slow and easy, or it seemed like he was the thunder, soft, far away, but getting closer all the time. All of the instruments blended up together, and just like that smell in the library, you couldn't tell which one was your favorite. First, you'd say it was Mr. Jimmy on the trumpet. Then Doodlebug's trombone would make you think it was the best. Then Dirty Deed would make the piano sound like water hitting big rocks, and you'd know there wasn't anything that sounded that good until Steady Eddie would make the saxophone sing and talk and dance around everyone else. And you'd swear that was the only sound you'd ever want to hear again. All the while, Herman E. Calloway and the thug kept everything moving by making the drums and the giant fiddle pound out a soft, steady beat, like someone's heart turned way up loud. You'd have a real hard time trying to figure out which instrument was your favorite until Miss Thomas opened her mouth. While the rest of the band was being a storm, she was the sun busting through thick gray clouds. With the first thing she sang, you had to wonder why this band was called Herman E. Calloway and the Dusky Devastators of the Depression, or Herman E. Calloway and the Nubian Nights. It should be called Miss Thomas and the Dusky Devastators of the Depression and a mean old guy on the giant fiddle. Excuse me, my allergies are acting up today. She was so good that she didn't even have to sing real words. Mostly she was saying things like la da dee da da, ha we oh, ha we a ho, ha we a day. Then Steady Eddie would answer on the saxophone. Before you knew it, the two of them were having a regular conversation. Every once in a while, Mr. Jimmy's trumpet would come in and put his 2 cents worth in. Then it would fade away. All the other instruments took turns trying to interrupt the conversation, but in the end, it was Miss Thomas's voice and steady saxophone doing the talking that you really wanted to listen to. Finally, Miss Thomas did a bunch more do-de-do, ba, and Steady answered with just when you thought you could understand this language they were talking. Miss Thomas broke out in American. She sang, "We haven't met since then, gee, but it's nice to see you again," she said. "Nice to see you again." And the storm was over. The last thing you could hear was the rain from the thug and the thunder from Herman E. Calloway getting further and farther away, like the storm had gone and blown itself over into the next county. Then it was dead quiet. I let the mop fall over and clapped as loud as I could and said, "Wow." Miss Thomas stood up and did one of her curtsy bows. I clapped louder. I could see now why this band got to have 6 exclamation points behind their name. Okay, 6th grade, let's talk about what we just read, chapter 17. So in the story, we start off with Bud pretending that he was mopping. He had chores to do, like he was promised that he'd have to earn his keep. But he went back to his memories where his mother read a story to him that he remembered. So he felt like he was a part of the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And he got a compliment from Miss Thomas as soon as he walked in. And she pointed out how well that how good a job he was doing. So he's a very good cleaner. Um, he was also impressed that the fact that the bucket had a ringer in it. So this leads us to believe that that was a step up from what he was used to. Because I don't know if you've ever mopped, but that nobody likes to wring out a mop with their hands, putting your hands in that dirty water. So that's not something he had to do. So it made the task way more enjoyable. If you could have fun, he made mopping fun. Um, so the type of figurative language we've been talking about that was when somebody says something literal, but it doesn't literally means that. So he used the expression, or it seemed like he was the thunder, soft and far away, and that's how he described Herman E. Calloway. And we know he's not literally like thunder, so that would be called a metaphor. Then what type of figurative language would it use that when he was talking about one of his bandmates, when he said his toothpick jumping right along with his fingers? That would be a personification because he was that band player. He always had a toothpick in his mouth. So that would be an example of personification. And we'll go into that more as we, as we finish these lessons. Okay, what type of mood did he have by the end of this chapter? He was really clapping his hands. So he was in a cheerful mood. So this chapter, even though he felt that Mr. Herman E. Calloway was trying to work him really hard, it didn't. It had a different effect. Instead, he found joy in it. Okay, Miss Thomas and Steady Eddie's saxophone went back and forth like a conversation. I mean, instruments and people singing, and at that point, she wasn't even using words. He compared it to them having a conversation. So that would be pretty much what our chapter was about. You need to go on and read chapter 18, and we'll do a read along later on, and I'll post that. Make sure you get out, get some fresh air. Today is Monday, May 5th. No, I'm sorry, May 4th. Monday, May 4th, and the sun is shining today. So make sure you get out there and have a great day.